All right, folks, let's get to the shout-out.
I'm looking for a remix. And now the shout-out.
Shout-out. Shout-out.
Valuable shout-out.
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 Pile of ideas was turned to low. It's quickly moving into the hot position.
And now the shout-out.
Shout-out.
Pause the video.
Shout-out. Shout-out.
Recovery mode.
Shout-out.
My brain is
Shout-out. Shout-out.
Geopolitical politics.
Shout-out.
Competition would start kicking in.
Shout-out.
I'm not funded by the Koch brothers.
Shout-out.
Do some research for yourself.
Shout-out. 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 Nice. And I'm sorry, folks, that I'm checking my phone. Sometimes I have to check my phone because of I don't have anything open in front of me in these computers except for Skype. So I need to manage some things, and I want to make sure that we have our first guest.
Yeah. Can I make a note on the do your own research thing Ruben said in that shout out thing there? I noticed that a lot, and that is such a con man's argument. Because here's the thing, if you want people to do research, give them a series of sources that they can go and check and then test your recommendations against what they later find on their own.
Jesus.
Like, you got to put yourself on the board.
This is like asking Dave to recommend the book he read about slavery.
Yeah, exactly. Dave, can you summarize Eric Foner for me, please? Not
plausible. I mean, I think when we're going to dunk on people, but we're going to give them an assignment, we need to make it remotely plausible. So I've mentioned before in other forums, and I don't like to dwell on it and certainly make any melodrama about it, but housing insecurity is something I dealt with for most of my life. And, in various ways, shapes, and forms, I know plenty of people who had it much worse. I know a fair amount of people who had it a hell of a lot easier and don't understand the enormous physical and psychological pressures of even being evicted or of, not thankfully, never actually, I mean, that line was crossed into, I guess being without a home when I was quite young and at other points, but even knowing that that's a plausible scenario takes an enormous psychological and physical toll. And Bernie Sanders' housing plan, which is the shout out, and I will use the shout out frequently to point out that Bernie Sanders is not only putting more points on the board than anybody else in the race, he's putting more points on the board than anybody in modern American politics. What's happening is that in 2019, because of the success of his 2016 campaign, because of the broader organic formations happening, he gets to have permission to revert to type. This is his politics. He is a democratic socialist. He does have these commitments. That's why he's willing to move so aggressively and propose things like building millions of affordable new housing units, just building them straight up. I'm quoting that from his website. In 2001, Bernie first introduced legislation to create the National Affordable Housing Trust Fund, based largely on the success of the Vermont Housing and Conservation Trust Fund. After a 15-year effort, in 2016, a modest version of Bernie's legislation became the first new federal affordable housing program funded in several decades. Moving on, he will, when he's president, he'll invest $1.48 trillion over 10 years in the National Affordable Housing Trust Fund to build, rehabilitate, and preserve 7.4 million quality, affordable, and accessible housing units to eliminate the affordable housing gap, which will remain affordable in perpetuity. Units constructed with this funding will be eligible to be located in mixed income developments. He'll invest an additional $400 billion to build 2 million mixed income social trust units to be administered through the National Affordable Housing Trust Fund. He'll revitalize our public housing stock. Across the country, public housing is in disrepair. It threatens people's health. It's a disaster. It's a raw expression of classism. And racism. He's going to pump billions to clean it up. 70 billion. He's going to make rent affordable. And this is the one I hear. I hear well, actually, rent control is problematic because blah, 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 blah. Let's be real. And I'll talk more about this in the future when we have more time. PC Magazine published a great piece in 2015. And I'm paraphrasing the title, but it was, a lot of the problems that economists warn about with rent control are not observable in reality. And I love that quote. That pretty much distills all of my politics. Rent control saves people's homes right now in New York City, to the extent that there are still working class and middle class families that can live in a decent neighborhood anywhere. I mean, I forget anywhere. And by decent, I mean accessible remotely to where they work, or maybe just where they grew up, and a house hasn't been completely priced out. It's because of rent controls. That's it. And then other people will say, oh, no, if you have rent controls, then we'll stop market incentives to create public, greater lower income housing. Of all of these various cockamamie Rube Goldberg schemes to create public housing options, to create affordable housing through market incentives, through giving away an obscene amount of breaks and bennies and everything else to the real estate industry, which is one of the most predatory, pernicious, dangerous on earth. Let's just ask a big picture question. Don't wonk out. Don't get nerdy. Maybe we could do that some other time. We'll go more into housing policy. Is there a major city in the United States where any of that approach has done anything to stop the housing crisis? Rot of neoliberalism. New York, San Francisco, LA, no. Now, if you want to follow the logic and say, hey, I don't care if people are priced out, move to the exurbs, okay? Then you can be honest about your politics, but we have a different value set. So I know a combination of a serious public housing option like we have in Austria and mass upgrades, the opportunity for low-income people to own homes combined with rent control. Yes, rent control is absolutely essential for fighting back and reversing this tide. That's what I know in reality, and not hypothetical wonk problems that most people, again, look, you know, most of you who, you're not Paul Krugman either, right? Like you're just speculating. I'm talking about actual reality of how things work in a city like New York, where people are able to keep onto homes and part of an actual strategy. He also has restitution for people dealing with foreclosures and has aggressive plans for desegregation to combat gentrification and exclusionary zoning. And there's way more. Like every other bill and legislation he's put forward, it's not just the best and the most progressive. It's from a completely different planet. And I'll keep going with the same mantra. I hope people will get serious and not squander this literally once in a lifetime opportunity, because this ain't coming up again on a federal level anytime remotely soon. And if Bernie doesn't do it this time, you think it's been enough of a struggle to get him in the front and center of national life? Think about how difficult it will be to replicate. So let's get serious. Shout out Housing for All, Bernie Sanders. You just watched a Michael Brooks show video. Subscribe to get them all. Why wouldn't you? Don't be foolish. Click subscribe below and become a patron as well. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks, everybody.